the Amateur Rugby Podcast, recording via Facebook Live on Thursday, 10th of December, 2020. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by the great British clothing brand Raging Bull. Raging Bull was founded by England Rugby World Cup winner Phil Vickery. And I'm very excited to be partnering with these guys, as Phil and I are the same age, and I was fortunate enough to play against them a number of times in schoolboy rugby. It's on contemporary but wearable clothing with the entire range available in sizes small all the way through to 6XL. Podcast UK, when you enter the code ARP10 at checkout, that's 10% off your entire order when you enter the code ARP10 at checkout. And guys, the Christmas sale is still on right now, so get there. There are some incredible bargains to be had for yourself or for Christmas presents for your loved ones. Get on over to ragingbull.co.uk. Okay, it's time. Let's go and see our guest. Mystery guest, would you please reveal yourself? Hello.
Hello.
This is Dickon Moon, everybody. Dickon, would you like to just give us a quick introduction?
Yes. Hi, I'm Dickon Moon. I'm the Director of Rugby at London Cornish Rugby Club, and currently in my 18th season in the role. I was originally born in Redruth in Cornwall, went to school in Penzance under the tutelage of a great Cornish player called Mike Jenkin. And if only I'd known that the scripture teacher I had there, Rex Carr, who used to slap our heads together, probably totally illegally now, was actually the RFU president some 25 years before. So
Wow.
I've been involved in the game in one way or another, right the way back from my early school days.
Wow, wonderful. There's a lot to dig into there straight away. First of all, 18 years as a director of rugby, that is crazy. How on earth have you managed to maintain doing that for so long?
I think it's a passion. When I first joined the club, I found out purely by chance that my parents actually knew the founders of the club. And so when I was asked to be director of rugby, it kind of felt like the right thing to do. I had broken pretty much everything there was to break. I'd broken like 27 bones in my rugby career. And so there was a message there somewhere. And I really only took on the job to try and get the club up a couple of leagues. But and maybe we were then in London 3, I think, and maybe, in Surrey 3, and maybe stay a couple of years. But it just became a passion that has been an never-ending one. And frankly, the current pandemic has only heightened my thirst to continue. Wonderful.
That's good to hear, because it's certainly a worry that the pandemic might cause people to just essentially hang up their boots, whether that's in a coaching role, volunteer, players obviously as well. So that's good to hear. How has the club in general got on during this COVID era? What have been the challenges that you've had? What have you done to overcome them? And what kind of position are you in at the moment?
Yeah, we're a unique club, really, because though we play at level 6, we're probably the only club at that level that don't own a clubhouse. We don't own our pitches. We don't own our training facilities. So we're really relatively itinerant. However, we've been at the same venue where the Rosslyn Park Sevens are played for over 50 years. And so we have a kind of security of tenure from that. And really the main job of the committee during the pandemic was to ensure that financially the club was going to survive through it. And we don't pay our players. They pay us for the privilege of playing. So our costs are relatively minimal, but we also had to cope with the fact that both our training facility and our pitches are rented. And so, we sort of went cap in hand to Wimbledon Common Conservators into Rosslyn Park, where we train, to see what they could do to help us. And I have to say, there's been great thanks to both those parties for the support they've given us in ensuring that we will indeed survive the pandemic and come out the other side.
Wonderful. Good stuff. Talking about your training facilities there, I've been seeing some of the stuff you've been putting up on Instagram and the like. It must be wonderful for your players to be able to train on an artificial pitch at this time of year. Is that what you're getting?
Absolutely. And, there's been real progress. When I began at the club, we trained on the backside of the old pitches down at Chiswick under sort of very poor lighting. And then I moved us to Battersea Park, but we couldn't get inside Battersea Park. We had trained under the light cast off the back of the floodlights outside the Battersea Park Arena. And then we managed to get a slot late at night inside on a Wednesday. We only train once a week. And so it's been a gradual progression until we were able, a few seasons back when Roston Park laid the AGP, to get a slot there. And it has been fantastic for us. We have half a pitch, one night a week, and we get numbers between 30 and 50 most weeks. And during the pandemic, those slipped off a bit, but it's still a steady number turning up every week. And as you say, we never lose a session to weather, and that's fantastic for us.
Yeah, wonderful. That, just talking about the floodlight situation, that reminds me of my early days at Old Colfians, where the floodlights were absolutely terrible. And as such, we basically trained in a 20-meter square area of pitch, and we wondered why we weren't able to spread the ball wide on a Saturday. It was because we were never able to do it in training ever. And I think that legacy is still ongoing. Like, we're still a massively forward-orientated club. And honestly, I think it might be because just hangover from those days of just being able to train on a postage stamp effectively. But so how are your players doing? How many people are still coming? Is there a lot of enthusiasm still within the ranks?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've seen a lot of.
And did you play any of the Rugby for Ready touch games that the RFU kind of proposed?
Yeah, we did. We did try those, and I think they went down well before the second lockdown. And I think we were moving through the stages, as every club was, really, to the point where we've reached now. I think there was enthusiasm to play up to a certain point. The point where we're at now, I think, is one that's well worth some discussion, because we are an amateur club, and all our players are professionals in the city, and so you've got this interesting conflict between people's professional lives and their personal ones, and we're at that point right now.
Okay, excellent. So, what are the players saying in terms of playing the amended game under the new rules, where there'll be no scrums and no mauls? Is it 100% everybody wants to play? Is it 0, or is it somewhere in between? And is it different per position as well?
Yeah, so we're surveying the club at the minute, and actually there's a very strong view coming through, and around half our forwards don't want to play under the amended rules where there is no vaccine available for COVID. And I think you have to remember that the general advice is that people who are carrying, let's just say, a little extra condition are more likely to be susceptible to more serious illnesses than those that aren't. And it is no surprise that amateur players who are carrying a little extra condition would consider it a risk they're not prepared to take. And so I have been letting the RFU know only yesterday that though we have a fixture list that is of friendlies purported to start in late January, there isn't a catch chance in hell of us being able to fill those fixtures at the minute. And I really think that people should ask their players about exactly what their feelings are before committing the clubs to jumping into any form of structure in the return to rugby. And I think you'll find there's probably a marked difference between those clubs that pay their players significant amounts of money and those that don't. And our feeling is that we're not going to play until such time as we have the support of enough of the broad church of our player base to actually move to that next stage.
Okay, and is that purely on a health and safety outlook, or is there some? I mean, my question is, I guess, what do the players think about the amended rules themselves, just as a game?
Yeah, I think there's a general feeling that the amended rules will see you as a glorified form of sevens, which rules out a lot of players that are not as quick. And I also think that we've also asked those same set of players whether they would play if there was a vaccine, and 100% have come back and said yes. And we're over 50 who've replied now to this survey. So not a single one is being lost to the game through the pandemic. They're being lost temporarily for the lack of a vaccine and not being prepared to take that risk. And I think that's a really important message. There is a thirst, a desire to play, but the thirst and desire is only as far as it's safe for everyone to do it. And I had, as you know, Tim, I had COVID back in March. It's no laughing matter. It's a thoroughly unpleasant thing. And for every younger person that gets it who it doesn't affect, there's going to be someone along the line who it does. And I think enough of our guys who are living and working in London know of somebody who it's affected badly, that it has made them a bit more risk averse.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Completely understandable. So looking forward, when do you, I mean, this is quite a tough question, I guess, but when do you think that might be the case? When do you think players might be comfortable to be coming back and playing full time again?
Well, I spoke to our committee last week, and my view is that we are planning for pre-season 2021-22, and I feel that's realistic. I'm all for people going out and getting exercise. I don't want to begrudge anyone from going out and playing if they have the support of their player base. But for us, if we do, it'll be on a very ad hoc basis, and I think it'll only be piecemeal. We're going to really target that pre-season. It's a fabulous league, London 1 South, when it does finally kick off. You've got London Welsh, London Irish Amateur, London Cornish, so there's a Tri-Nation straight away. You've got a whole bunch of great Sussex clubs, a load of Hampshire clubs, some strong Surrey clubs. There are a couple in Kent. It's a really strong league, and I know all of us are thoroughly anticipating it being a cracker. And it's going to be tough. We're under no illusion as a club that escaped relegation only in the last few weeks of our season that it's going to be tough. But we're relishing it when the time comes. We're really up for it. The other thing I'd say, Tim, that I think it's really affected clubs, particularly amateur clubs. I don't know about the semi-pro level. Well, I know the level, but I don't, because we're playing at semi-pro level, but I don't know about semi-pro clubs. It's really affected recruitment because people are not moving as much as they once did at the minute. I think people are not moving from, say Cornwall, for example, up to London or wherever they are in the country to London. And again, I think that's because they're risk averse. London's got a heightened incidence of COVID. We're not seeing as many players, even getting sniffs of players moving up that we could recruit. So that's a change. And I hope that when the vaccine is rolled out, that we'll see that trend reversed, because it's the lifeblood for us. And actually, and I'm digressing slightly, but one of the things as a club we've decided to do, because we've got this hiatus and we've got a little extra time, is look at the possibility of starting a mini rugby section in time for next season. So that is something that we now have put some bodies behind, and that's, we're trying to make something positive out of the pandemic. And because this issue of player recruitment and sustainability sits on my shoulders every season, and I am a headhunter, so it's not completely onerous task. It is certainly the case that the issue of sustainability at the rugby club is challenging for the committee and for all of us that have been there a while. And so we're trying to draw something out of the pandemic.
Time to stop and think and plan. So it's great to hear that you're trying to do something positive with the time that it's given you. How are those plans coming along for the minis and juniors section? Do you think it's going to be in place for the start of the 2021 season?
21-22, yes, I think it will be.
Yes.
We've got a few people we need to get permissions from and get support from, but there is a will. We believe that we will be able to attract players. And we're going to not be too ambitious. We'll probably target 1 or 2 year groups initially, and build from there. And it might be that we're not anticipating being able to play games or anything like that straight away. We'll take a softly approach, but we have within our group a number of PE teachers at schools, which is incredibly helpful, both in terms of the ability to teach with already having the right qualifications and their ability to reach potential players to come and play for us. We want to make it very community based. We're probably not that well known within the area in which we actually play. We're better known back home in Cornwall. So that's something that we believe we can tap into.
Yeah, for sure. And just that's an interesting point about your kind of supporter base almost and your ties to Cornwall. How strong are those ties, and how many Cornish people are there living in London that come and support you, and vice versa? It's
extraordinary, actually. We many of our games are reported live on Radio Cornwall. I do a lot of interviews on Radio Cornwall. And if I don't write our match reports within 24 hours of the matches, the tirade of abuse is probably too strong words, but polite reminders coming from God's country is extraordinary. We have a very strong former players base down in Cornwall, the Cornwall branch of the London Cornish Rugby Club, and those guys are amazing. We have our photographer and her husband drive up from Cornwall most weeks to our matches on the day, which is extraordinary commitment, and the photos on our website are testament to just how amazing she is. And so we are very fortunate to have that. But we also have, former players all over the world, and they never hesitate to get in touch. We've run during the pandemic, those of you that are regular viewers of our website will know that we've actually been running from inception to sort of 1980s flashback series, taking photographs, asking people to get in touch if they knew who was involved, telling a few stories. And that has really driven a tremendous community of former players to get back in touch with the club. And so we're really proud of that. And that's something, having captured, we're really keen to keep hold of. Again, something positive to come out of this hiatus. Yeah, that's fabulous. And one of the reasons why I really love doing this podcast is ideas like that hopefully will be shared and other people will hear them, and it might inspire other clubs and other people to do the same. Because look, the game of rugby is amazing. We all love it. There's no question about that. But it's the community really that I think is why we all love it as much as we do. So with that being taken away from us during COVID, obviously what you've managed to do is almost throw that blanket wide and get that entire community that's been involved with the club over a huge number of years to reconnect, which is a really great thing. It is, and it's too easily, these people are too easily lost to the game. It's difficult enough when you attract a player back who gives up the game at university, but to lose touch with them again when they stop playing is a real shame. And we're not a town-based club or a city-based club, or indeed an old boys-based club. So there's no natural place for these people to come back to, nor do we have a clubhouse. We actually use a bar that belongs to a cricket club about a mile from the ground. That's something, again, on the issue of sustainability, we hope to change in the future. But it does mean that it's quite difficult for the club to actually attract and retain people if once they move away from the area. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that we have these arms around a wider group of vice presidents, if you like, and supporters, such that they can get involved and get back in touch with people again. Yeah, fabulous. Okay, let's try and circle back around to the topic if we can. You mentioned a lot of the other clubs that are in your league at the moment, and you're right, some really fabulous clubs that you mentioned there. Have you been speaking to those clubs? What's the general feeling amongst other clubs at your level? Are they planning on playing the amended game, and are they having the same experience as you, or something slightly different? Yeah, so I mean, I know Camberley are in our league, and I've been in touch with some of the people there, and another strong club with great history, and I know they're itching to get going. And I think part of the reason that clubs like Camberley are itching to get going is perhaps that their players are not based in London. And I think the challenge for a London-based club is that the prevalence of COVID is back on the rise again in London. People are seeing it as a much more of a challenge than perhaps they do in some of the outlying towns and cities. And so I think it is an issue, particularly if you are not paying your players. I think there will be clubs that are very keen to get going. I know London Welsh are champing at the bit and have been, since they came up into the league. And they've got a tremendous structure supporting them right across every level. And I fully understand that with the supporter base they have, that's something that they're very keen on doing. But equally, you need opposition. And I think, the likelihood is that opposition is going to come from other clubs that are of the similar ilk to Welsh, rather than some of the clubs that are perhaps coming from a more humble backgrounds, such as Cornish. So I suspect there will be clubs out there that are very keen to get going. Tom Williams, who's the director of rugby or head coach at Guildford, his kids and my kids go to the same school, so he and I see a lot of each other. I get on very well with Tom, and he is also kind of mixed about whether it's going to happen and how many numbers they'll have, and whether there are enough players who are genuinely able to go and pitch up every week to play. It's not a given, even for a big club like Guildford. My kid, because we don't have a mini section at the minute, goes to Cobham every Sunday to the mini rugby there. And if you judge it on the number of kids attending mini rugby at Cobham, the game's in rude health. There's a club doing amazing things to attract and retain people. There's a very large number of volunteer coaches working with them. And my guess is that, that they are another club that probably would be keen to get cracking and get back into action. Fair play to any of those clubs that have that ability. But I suspect they're not going to be so many in central London locations whose player base is amateurs who have professional jobs in London.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's talk about the actual game itself with the amended laws. Now, in your situation, with you not probably intending to play any games, you might not have given it much thought. So I'll kick off. I think that some of the heavier players, shall we say, might be just as necessary in this amended game, because if there's no space on the field sideways, that means you've got to go forward and drag players into channels. So I'm not sure whether this kind of idea that the props are just going to be ruled out and they won't find a place, I'm not sure if that's going to be entirely true. I think getting go forward and getting as far up a channel as you can is going to be even more important. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there was a move amongst some of the clubs in our league to try and get clubs to field 3 front row in every game. And I think if you have them, happy days. I know, our front row, and I think we had this discussion previously, our front row are amongst the most intelligent players at the club. And these guys really understand the game really well. And some of them got amazing hands, wonderful hands, and I think they'll be itching to do exactly that, to get themselves on the ball, to see perhaps not having to scrummage and not having to maul is an appeal to somebody who, is really a front row, but in his head, he's a 10. And every club has them. They're the guys that when you're doing the warm up are trying to practice their kicking, even though they're a tight head. And those guys, for them, it's kind of happy days. This is the opportunity they've been waiting for, to show everyone else at the club that actually, if it weren't for scrummaging, it weren't for mauling, they really are a 10.
I'm smiling so much, Dickon, because you're precisely describing how I used to start my training sessions with drop goal practice, basically, and long touch finders as well. And in fact, when I used to do with our wingers practicing their high balls before the games, I was the one that used to do box kicks for one of the teams that I played for in the warm ups, because I wasn't too bad at it, to be honest. About this position and potentially leaving players out. I'm sure some people will feel that they don't want to play this game because actually the only enjoyment they get out of rugby is actually the real grunt and physical pressure of being in a front row or being in a maul, and actually all the running around and all that kind of stuff. It's not why they play the game anyway. So I'm sure some players won't want to play it, but the bigger picture is there's a lot of players that will, and if it can get the game being played again, if it can get people at rugby clubs, if it can get people playing some kind of contact rugby, I think it has to be a good thing overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think it has to be a good thing, but it has to be done in a way that supports those people that want to feel safe. And so You have to respect players that don't want to play. I don't think you can hold that against them. Absolutely not. I think it will certainly enable people to develop skills. It'll get people fitter again. Contact, as you know, is something that's very hard. Your body, when you stop playing and you try and start playing again, your body loses that condition quite quickly, particularly when you get to a tender age, as you and I both are. One hopes you don't lose players who come back to the game having not had contact and now find it too hard. The recovery is too long. And at the amateur level, that is a real risk. And, I don't think we'll really know the effects of pretty much most of the season off that really has on players till much, much later on, maybe even a year or two, when we'll have an assessment of how many more injuries people are getting and how perhaps we're losing players whose bodies haven't made that recovery.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I listen to a lot of rugby podcasts, and people that have recently retired always talk about just how nice it feels that you're not aching every week and you're not in constant pain. So I guess there is a slight concern that some players, particularly potentially towards the end of their career, will feel that and go, actually, what is the benefit here? Do I want to put myself through that again? I'm sure, unfortunately, we will lose some players because of that. And I think you're right. There's a potential that I think coaches, and I'm sure most coaches just need to be sensible about getting people back into contact rugby and how long it's going to take, and just do it in really small incremental chunks. Obviously, you guys are aiming for pre-season 2021, so you've got plenty of time to really ramp that up slowly.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, we will still go ahead. We are training every Wednesday, and we will still take it as far as we can in terms of contact. And if we do have the numbers, then we will stump up a team, But I have let the RFU know this week that I think it's way too ambitious to expect us to play in January, and that we'll need a bit of time to get, up to speed. We have fortunately had a referee stick his hand up and say, I'll come down to your sessions and help you play within the new laws and the new amendments rather, and that's incredibly helpful. And I think the attitude of the London Society refs, as I'm sure is reflected across the country, has been outstanding. They're as keen to get going as we all are. And when we do start, in whatever form it might take, I really hope that we are as equally supportive as the referees as we are of our players.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, I think we've put everything to rest there and solved rugby for another week. So one final question, as always, on the hot topics. What would you, as a rugby person, like for Christmas?
So I'm going to take it to a personal one and then a rugby one. So I think what I'd like for Christmas, and hopefully my wife's working on this, is a ticket to the King George V chase on Boxing Day, which is whenever I've had a bad day at rugby, I always record the racing, and so I don't have to worry about rugby. I watch racing, and jump racing is my other passion. So I'd love a ticket to that. From a rugby perspective, a return to grassroots rugby, full contact, proper rugby with scrums and lineouts and mauls would be my dream. I think one of the things that this pandemic has done is heightened my desire to see it being played again and to enjoy it for what it is. And that's been helped by the drudge that's been served up by the international and premiership teams. And just while we're on that, very briefly, I have a strong view that it's tough to be critical of Eddie Jones when all he's doing is reflecting what most of us see on in the Premier Division every week, which is poor rugby. Or boring rugby, should I say? And yeah, if you want kick chases and those sort of things, and they turn you on, great. But I'd rather see the flawed defences down at grassroots back up and running, because that's what I enjoy the most.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say the elite game and the grassroots game, in terms of style of rugby, is getting further and further apart. There's no question about that. Okay, brilliant, Dickon. If people want to get hold of you in terms of getting in touch with you personally or about London Cornish, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I have an email address, which is dmoon@stpiran.com. So that's stpirran.com, which is on our website. You can get to our website at lcrfc.co.uk. It's a decent enough website. Also our Twitter feed, LCRFC @LCRFC. We're on there an awful lot. I'm in charge of that one, but I'm not in charge of our Instagram account, which is also very, very visible. And so again, you can look up London Cornish on Instagram. We're very visible there. Our website is pretty dynamic and well worth a look if you want to have a look at some articles going back. And occasionally I throw an opinion piece in there for you to disagree with. Oh, one final thing. I'm on Rolling Maul fairly regularly under my own name, because I believe if you post something controversial, you should have the balls to back it up with your own name. So I'm there under the name of Dickon.
Perfect. Okay. To everybody at home, I will link all that up in the show notes below. So don't worry about going running for a pencil or anything like that. It'll all be linked below. Thank you, Dickon, for a really fun chat, and good to hear that London Cornish is in good health, you know, relatively, and you've got some good plans going forward.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks very much.
Today, and please share it with your mates. No problem. Stick it on a WhatsApp group. We're on all the socials on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe as well. Subscribe and make sure you get notified of all future episodes. If you've got an opinion about this amended game that's coming up, then we'd love to hear from you. Get on the comments or get on Twitter and give us a shout. And